All righty. Well, thank you all. Thank you, Heather, for inviting me to attend. My name is Nolan Brewer. I currently work for the Washington Department of Natural Resources in our service forestry shop. So I work as a coordinator, which is a lot of working with private landowners, securing grant funding for private lands fuels reduction. And we have a pretty robust cost share program in the state, on the east side of the state at least. So that's where we tend to work. A lot of the work we do in and around homes is all mechanical thinning. So mostly it's chainsaws and piles and burning, or mastication type work. So that's primarily where we operate. So for moving over to the education and qualifications, kind of strange to me to think that I'm actually mid-career in this now, which I guess I am firmly in that category. So I graduated in 2003 from Whitman College in Walla Walla, Washington, with a degree in geology and environmental studies. I found fire that summer, or kind of knew I was going to get into that, and I'll talk about that a bit more, which kind of really directed me towards that Master's of Forestry from the University of Idaho in 2012. So I've been in and around fire and fuels work since 2003, and relevant qualifications probably for this audience mostly is that work in prescribed fire quite a bit. I'm working on my RXB2, although life seems to happen quite a bit, and so it's been hanging in that trainee category for quite a few years now, and that's fine with me, along with Incident Commander Type 3, and then I am qualified as a Division Group Supervisor. So a little bit about myself. I grew up in southern Idaho and currently reside in Wenatchee, Washington. So the climate's about the same. Sage steppe transitioning into timber, which I just love that sort of environment. Really, I think for me, my interests are my family. And I have two boys, which I'll reference quite a bit, and my wife kind of drive a lot of my career decisions to date, I think. But I also enjoy all the sort of typical Western outdoor activities, skiing in the wintertime, hunting, mountain biking, camping as much as possible, and getting on a raft and doing like multi-day raft trips, which I hope to do more of as my boys get older. So, that's a little bit about me and kind of where I've come from. So I started my journey, like I said, around 2003. I was working for the U.S. Forest Service, and kind of worked in a few different areas. I started on the Walla Walla District and on the Umatilla National Forest, where I was most recently graduated from college there, and have been working around prescribed fire that entire time. So I kind of like this middle picture here. It's I'm sitting on the far left over there, but then next to me in the back there's John Worth, and he actually works with the Indiana Hot Shots still. And then next to him with the chainsaw in front of him is Mike Barajas, who works on the Okanagan-Wenatchee National Forest as a battalion in fuels for the Wenatchee River Ranger District. So kind of fun to look back at some of these old pictures, Heather, as we were preparing for this, and just really looking at some of the people I've worked with along the way. And it's pretty cool to see these old pictures. And it's like, oh yeah, I remember we used to all hang out together on the side of the mountain and do prescribed fire in the springtime and stuff up in the Methow Valley. That's where this one was taken. So that's really where I cut my teeth with prescribed fire work, was working with the Forest Service. So here we are, the full career ladder, if you will. Like I said, Umatilla National Forest is where I got my start. Went back to Boise for a year, worked down there with the hand crew, detailing with the hot shot crew, things like that. quickly realized this was definitely my jam, and so I wanted to get into fire and fuels a little more permanently. I decided to apply for the apprenticeship program, which that's where I was for a while, and was able to work up in the Methow Valley for the Okanagan-Wenatchee National Forest doing that. During that time, they sponsored me to detail to the Cedar City Hot Shots, Price Valley Repellers on the Payette National Forest, to where I was able to get my crew time and helicopter time for that. And then, so the pictures over there, you know, sort of represent that. And then the one of me, that's actually my wife next to me, and that's on the Payette. I just finished a rappel out of the Crassel district, and we were back at the heli base there. And so pretty cool that, you know, she's still stuck around long enough. She's not doing fire, but you know, she was working seasonally doing fisheries, and I was working seasonally doing fire. So kind of a fun thing there. So then after that, I was able to spend a year detailed with the Redmond Smoke Jumpers, which was great. I think that was the year that we got married. So that sort of factored into quite a few different decisions in my life and my career. So I went from there to the University of Idaho, where I met Heather for the first time, and pursued my master's degree in forest resources. From there, I was, it was 2013 when I finished that program and was trying to figure out the next step. And my wife was transitioning her career as well to occupational therapy. She got into school in Eastern Washington, so I was looking around Spokane frantically trying to find work. And I came across this DNR fire warden gig back in 2013, and was able to start work with the DNR. You know, and I'll tell everybody this, like, I always thought DNR was going to be kind of short term in my career, and I was going to get back with the Forest Service. And then funny enough, here I am. I still sit with DNR, but was really able to cut my teeth not only in mostly with the suppression operations side. So a lot of the qualifications, you know, that's really where I worked and learned and grew in my fire career there with all of the qualifications, and then was able to support both the Turnbull Wildlife Refuge and the Colville National Forest in some prescribed fire opportunities. Was able to work through my firing boss there. So that was pretty neat that I was able to do that, along as pursue some of those operational qualifications. While I was in Spokane, I then transitioned to this whole like landowner assistance thing, which I thought was really cool because, you know, from my standpoint, where do we tend to fight fire and put our resources on fires? And that is on and around private lands and around homes. And so really to be able to work with private landowners and share what I knew and help them get their space defensible was really cool, and I really enjoyed that. But Spokane just wasn't it for us. We kind of knew it wasn't our final stop. So then we moved to Wenatchee, and I took basically a fire unit manager, FMO type position with DNR in Wenatchee, Washington in 2016. And so that's where I was for a while until I switched back into service forestry. And then key to that whole sort of career pathway and trajectory was becoming a dad and realizing sort of what the fire demands meant for me, and was trying to do that whole work-life balance thing. And so, you know, coming back into the service forestry or landowner assistance program with DNR was really cool for me to be able to kind of make that jump. And I did that in 2019. And so here I sit in sort of that current role. So yeah, long pathway, couple different agencies, but, and a little break to go back to school. So what do I enjoy about fuels and fire? And I think for me, the term being a student of fire has always sort of rang true for me. You'll see the picture there, probably a little more student of fire than most people will get. But I was helping with a project there on the left-hand side of your screen. That's Andy Hudak with the research station, and that's my lab mate. I think Wade Tinkham over there with a torch in his hand. I'm standing there with the video trying to get it all on video, but this is Basalt Hill, Heather, up on the University of Idaho Experimental Forest, and we're testing out some different. We're looking at white ash here and some of the remotely sensed data after prescribed fire. So it was helping Andy with that stuff. So it was kind of a cool project for us there. The picture up on top, big group picture, that was 2017 Trex held in Leavenworth, Washington, which was a great event. We really helped a lot of the Forest Service do their burning. And then I've got a few just random like glory fire shots, right? What do you expect, right? That's why we love what we do. But the one trees torching is actually right behind a bunch of homes in Spokane. We were doing a small burnout there, and then that's Mount Jefferson in the background on that lower right-hand picture, doing a fire for the Warm Springs Reservation down there a few years ago. So yeah, it's been a good career, and I just enjoy the people. I enjoy, like I said, being a student of fire all throughout, and really challenging myself in that way. So yeah, I just went on to wildfire today when I was thinking about challenges, just knowing what I'd sort of read there a little bit. And I know that Kate has already kind of talked about it, but smoke and smoke issues around that, definitely for Washington is a challenge. Not only the sort of impacts to my health, long-term impacts to my health or community health, but just everything from getting burn approval and different things like that. Yeah, that's definitely one of the bigger challenges in the career around fire and fuels. And then, yeah, this sort of latest one, the litigious nature of burning. And this was an event in Oregon, and I'm pretty sure most people here have probably heard about that. That happened this fall, where there was a Forest Service employee acting in his scope of duties that was arrested because a burn escaped over onto private lands. So yeah, it's a really interesting time to sort of be a prescribed fire practitioner and be thinking about how, we might be impacted by decisions we make out there while we're burning. So I don't know if that's going to carry across, to everybody or in all situations, but that's why I put some question marks there. That litigious nature is sort of out there. I think smoke is sort of ubiquitous across every state or agency, right? That's just something that we all see and deal with. The other one I have, sort of that social license piece. At least in Central Washington, I think most of the public is on board with it. I think there's still sort of this linkage between social license and smoke. After a real bad smoke year from a wildfire standpoint, and then we're talking about putting more smoke in the air in the fall. I've definitely received comments from community members on that. So social license, I think, yeah, it seems like most parts in Eastern Washington, we have it to a point, right? And I realize that might change also, just depending on where folks are working or have experience working. And the other ones, I think for me, more personal, right? That whole workforce development issue. And then I put a picture of my family up there for me as well. And I think this applies to most people in fire career, is sort of that work-life balance, right? And I hear the demand, and Washington State has a very high demand in terms of what we're asking in terms of acres treated for our own 20-year strategic plan, how that ties into the National Cohesive Strategy. We're asking a lot of our fire practitioners to treat acres out there. And like I said, and probably a lot of you can sort of relate to in this audience, coming on the heels of a very busy fire season with lots of hours of overtime, and then you're being asked to do additional work in the fuel in the fuels side, which again takes you away from other things. So, that's just sort of our reality that we have sort of moving forward. So I don't think any of that should be new to folks, but at least for me, I think that work-life balance really did come into more of a focus the later I got in life, and as my sort of priority shifted in my own life. So I was all about chasing fire and overtime in my 20s, even into my 30s. But that's really sort of changed over the last few years, where I think that priority shifted for me. So Heather, this slide is great, by the way. I really appreciate this one because most of us, at least back when I was applying for Forest Service jobs, there was this whole KSA section. So here's my attempt at it, right? So knowledge and background in forest and rangeland ecology. And I do want to emphasize that rangeland piece, just because I think as foresters and people in the forestry field, I think making that linkage to sort of how that transition works in the ecotones from your shrub stage steppe environments into your forested environments. I'm really interested in that based on where I am in Eastern Washington here, and how we can build more resilient sort of fuels work into the sage steppe. So yeah, wanted to highlight that. Other knowledge is plant succession, right? And some basic stuff here. Disturbance ecology, sort of in general, for your systems that you're working in. But beyond just the ecology and science, I think the idea of learning how the social wildland interaction occurs, that's pretty important. A pretty important skill to have and develop. Sort of tied to that is the idea of community and forest management planning. So that could be a whole lot of different things to a whole lot of different people. For private landowners, it's working with them to identify their own objectives for their own piece of forested land. And then I put monitoring skills down at the bottom, because that is going to be a key piece, I think, especially in Washington State, in terms of seeking out more funding, reporting out to various bodies that fund us in our work. So we've got to be able to show that. So having some background in that's going to be important. Skills wise, I think, a lot of our prescribed fire really does lean on having a strong background in fire operations. Like, there's just no way of getting around that. You've got to spend time on an engine, hand crew, helicopter crew, just developing your suppression skills, because of the way that NWCG sort of links prescribed fire and fire operations. Beyond just the fire side of things, it's really important that folks, in my opinion, develop a good, robust understanding of just forestry operations in general. So that can include things like timber sale management, contract management, different things like that. But just understanding all of that and developing that for your skill set is going to be pretty important, not only for a background in fire, but obviously as you move into prescribed fire, sort of understanding where you sit in sort of the full forest picture, and how to get things to NEPA planning all the way through down to you have a burn plan in hand, and you're starting your test fire, right? So that kind of leads into the next one, understanding that process for developing forest management plans for private landowners, municipalities, state agencies, federal agencies, and how prescribed fire fits into all of that sort of NEPA, or in the case of a state agency that I work for, that SEPA document. And then attitudes, I just wanted to come back to the idea of that student of fire sort of mentality, and I realized I didn't close my quotations there, but that's something that I think is really going to be helpful for anyone that wants to be successful in this arena. Be flexible and adaptive. When I switched from the Forest Service to the DNR, there's a whole different way of doing things, and it, wasn't better or worse. It was just different. And so being adaptive and being flexible with that was pretty important. And, I think that helps, especially when working with private landowners, sort of coming up with different ways of working with them to meet them where they are. Other attitudes I really think are critical for our work is just being creative in your thinking, and then just being motivated to get out and find those solutions or think differently about problems. So again, the KSAs that developed in fire and fuels that served me well in life. The big ones are being a team player, being a situational leader or follower, whatever the situation sort of demands. That knowledge, again, that sort of work ethic, I think that was instilled, probably before fire, but definitely through fire is really important. And then sort of that land ethic piece, I think, sort of came along with just as I grew in my knowledge of fire and forestry, but just that conservation sort of land ethic approach to fire and fuels work, I think, is pretty cool, and something that came, and it does serve me well in life now. Skills, communication skills are huge. I said mostly listening in there because I feel like that's where I learn the most, is listening to different people or different approaches, different ways to do things. Patience and just remaining adaptive, I think, are things that through fire you just have to deal with. And so that's really, those things have really come out, which I think serves me where I am now. And then again, those attitudes of being motivated and setting small goals to meet some big goals. So just keeping that goal out in front of us. And I think the other thing is that I probably didn't put in there is being okay with that goal shifting a bit, right? Like I said, for me, I thought I'd stay with the Forest Service for a long time, and I actually had switched entirely to a state agency, and that's okay, right? That being okay with that change and still being in the fire and fuels and forestry arena. Okay. So this last one, I think, is, from Heather, the ideas that I sort of saw were getting a career in this field, and then being successful. So starting with like getting a career, for me, commit to building relationships. That was really important. Thinking of all the different places I've worked and just knowing people. I know Kate, who will speak here in a little bit, a lot of us were like, oh yeah, do you know this person or that person in fire? And it's like, all of a sudden you find yourself, the more you've been in the fire game, it's a small world and it's a small community. Doesn't matter if you drive a yellow truck, red truck, or green truck, you tend to know the same people. And so that's a really important thing about this line of work, is building relationships, because it's probably going to be like the 7 degrees of separation if you're applying for a job. And I know that, like Kate knows you, I'm probably going to call Kate and ask about, what you're about, right? Something that I think, if you see a job that you want, don't be afraid to cold call people. I'm not sure, it's been my experience as a supervisor of a fire shop for a while. I was surprised with the amount of people that didn't call me for a seasonal job. And when I was coming up through the whole federal hiring process, that is like, you needed to be that squeaky wheel. And I remember calling jump bases, trying to get jobs, and harassing them and calling them once every 2 weeks because it was on my reminder, right, to do that. Driving to bases to get a job interview, different things like that. But I don't know if that's still, if people are still doing that, or at least just being able to cold call people. If you're, located in the East Coast and you want to get a job out West, like, just don't be afraid to do that and build those relationships over the phone if you need to. One thing, again, I think for me, diversify what you're looking for and where you're looking. I would have never thought to apply for a DNR job, except I think somebody maybe would mentioned it to me, and that's why I started looking there. I was really focused on like the USA job site and all that. So, you know, and that applies not only with state jobs, but there's conservation districts out there doing really cool work, and some other NGOs that are out there doing really neat things. So yeah, just don't be too picky, especially when you're trying to just get your foot in the door. Be willing to move around. Again, you know, this comes from, you know, where I came from, is like you had to sort of move around within the agency to move up. And then if you're committed to one place, which that certainly happens, be open to sort of some different types of work. An example of that would be for DNR, right? Being a state lands forester and helping set timber sales up and do that whole side of the shop, that's a really, really good experience as well. So all of that stuff will translate, you know, into that future job for you. So don't be afraid to take something that might be a little bit outside of sort of that fire and fuel shop if you know, if the opportunity is there and you really want to work in that spot and you think it would be worthwhile. And so I guess to close that all up is like, be willing to work at getting a job. You know, I say that just based on sort of what I've seen over the years of trying to hire seasonal staff or even permanent staff. You know, nothing's really given to folks, right? Yeah, just kind of work hard at getting yourself where you want to be. So then, you know, once you have a job that you like and you want to, you know, become more successful, you know, take this for what it is, right? For me, things that have really helped are developing a diverse background and skill set. So, like I said, I really wanted to develop my forestry skills. So working with our state lands group and going and help set up timber sales or comply those sales, you know, that really helped round out a different side of me than I thought that I needed in my 20s, right? And again, just continue to build and maintain your relationships as you go along. And, you know, similar to trying to get a job, don't ever get too comfortable or feel like an agency or outfit owes you something because you've worked there for 5 or 10 years, right? So for me, it's finding sort of that work-life balance. And then, like I said before, just being willing to change that as needed to. And for me, you know, part of that change was moving out from a primary fire position into a service forestry position that gives me some different opportunities and gets me that work-life balance that works for me. Really helped sort of myself and probably my career. Then the last one I'll leave you guys with is continuing to challenge yourself and set some new goals and opportunities for yourself. And explore those. So I think that might be it, Heather. And I hope that was kind of what you were hoping for.
That was awesome, Nolan. Thank you.